I wanted to dress up in poor, but I'm sorry, I don't have poor people costume. I don't do poor people garb. Pearl, I ask the question, is the sterility here a cop-out? Because once the man is sterile, acceptance here is more like resignation, okay? Welcome to my channel. My name is Pearl, and on this channel we discuss all things African cinema, specifically Nollywood. Today we're reviewing A Father's Love. This movie is a drama currently streaming on Prime Video. This movie, A Father's Love, is written by Sifa, Asani, Gowon and directed by Sebastian, Ukwa. Let's get straight to the synopsis. The synopsis says, they've already got more problems than they have solutions. 3 kids, one with sickle cell anemia, pressure mounting, and only so many hours in the day to make enough so the family doesn't literally starve. Then a baby is abandoned in the back of his taxi. No one believes David has nothing to do with the baby, and that's before a terrible secret is revealed. Suddenly nothing is as it seems. Guys, I'd like to invite you to please take a moment to like this video. It's a small thing, but it means a lot to me. It means a lot to the channel. Also, it helps with the algorithm because it tells YouTube that you like my videos and it pushes them to you, takes out some of the guesswork. You're happy, I'm happy, all of us are happy. Another thing that helps, guys, when you subscribe. A very small percentage of you who are watching my videos are subscribed, so I'd like to really ask you to please consider subscribing to my channel. We are already in a friends with benefits relationship, so let's just make it official. I do need the encouragement, guys. Thank you so much. Let's talk about A Father's Love. First thoughts, first impressions, just a general overview. This movie is yet another offering from the First Features project, which the last movie that was reviewed here, Kilborough, was the 4th in that lineup, and guys, it's only getting better. At this point, if you go on Prime Video and you're not sure what to watch, assuming I haven't recommended enough things to you here, just Google First Features and see what they have now. There have been a few misses, make no mistake, it's not been perfect, but generally speaking, they're killing it. All of this is just making me feel really reanimated and encouraged about the future of the industry. Sometimes it just seems very grim. You're like, it's just going downhill, but then it feels to me like there's been an upsurge. Things are looking good, so just color me happy. I still wish that Prime Video would do better with promoting their content. They just really suck at that. So on that note, I just want to say thank you to Nolly Goodfellow who pointed me in the direction of this movie. Thank you. And he's got a channel right here on YouTube. He's much briefer than I am. His videos are on average 7 minutes. Enjoy my videos, but please go over and enjoy his videos. He's a different flavor. He's an Indian guy, so his perspective as an outsider is also very valuable to the conversation. Let's discuss A Father's Love. Spoiler alert, guys, beyond this point all bets are off. So if you haven't watched this movie, it's right there on Prime Video, so go watch it. You have my recommendation, so go ahead and watch it and then come back so that you don't have to wonder what I'm talking about or be afraid that you're going to catch a spoiler. Let's get straight to talking about the performances. This movie stars David Jones David and Yvonne Jegede and a host of others. David Jones David, the first thing I'm going to say, and my face is bursting, is that he's a really close friend, and I'm just so happy to see him starring in this incredible movie because he's been way past due for not just a big role, but a big role like this that really gives him the opportunity to showcase his range, his versatility. He's a multi-talented person. I've collaborated with him in the past. We've done a song together. I don't want anybody to ask me any questions about that song. Don't ask me. And we've also done some improv acting together. Again, please, no questions, don't ask me. But on a serious note, he's just also, apart from the act, the fantastic musician. He was first introduced, I'd like to say, to the world as Timmy Emeni in Hotel Majestic. You guys, I'm sure many of you have very fond memories of Hotel Majestic. But let's talk about his performance here. He kills it. I've already said that he's really talented, and this movie gives him the opportunity to really show his acting chops and range in this particular way because this character is very subtle. There's nothing over the top here. There's no much opportunity for exaggerated acting. It's all in the face. It's all in the way he reacts. It's all the emotion. This is a role that requires a lot of facial expressiveness, and he carried it, and I've really enjoyed watching him in this role of David. That's the name of his character, David playing David. Perfect. So I'm just going to say that his performance was amazing. Let's talk about Yvonne Jegede, by the way, who plays his wife in the character of Ladi. She continues to be a revelation. You guys might remember me raving about her in Adire. So she's again a hugely talented actress actress. She's also very expressive, and also she knows how to handle very nuanced and controlled performances. Look, I just feel like watching them and other actors like them, I'm always really happy when I see us moving away from the more celebrity kind of actors to people who are genuinely about the craft and not about the showiness and the celebrity of it. I'm not throwing any shade to anyone, but just saying. So yeah, I really enjoyed her performance in this role. And then the next person I'll talk about is Funny Bone, whose government name is Chibuna Stanley. In his character as Panshak here, who's a friend of the couple, he's very natural here. His acting is very believable, and he really just performed excellent in that role as a friend to both of them, as a sounding board, especially to David, and I really enjoyed his performance here. We have our two child actors whom we are coming to really love. Every time we see them, they're like a bright ray on the screen because they're growing so fast, but they're learning also so well and really acquitting themselves in any role that they're given. They're children, you know, so we're not expecting perfection, but with the right directing, they usually do perform very well, and this role is no exception. In addition to that, they're very well directed here. And then finally, Uche Jumbo, she plays the character here. I can't remember her name, if she was named, but she's the radio host of a Lagos talk show, and her performance here is very earthy, it's very relaxed, it's very believable, neither more or less than is expected of someone of her caliber. She's a very talented actor, and she really performed beautifully in this role. I love the character in itself, and I love her performance of this role. All right, let's get straight, guys, to what works. The first thing I'm going to say that I love about this movie is the world of this story, specifically Lagos as a character. This is Lagos as we've never seen Lagos before. There's so many places that are not commonplace like we see on our screens. We have that mechanic workshop that is just such a natural setting. We have the taxi rank that made me miss so much a taxi rank in Ikeja, because was I frequent? I was frequent, you know, so I just had so much nostalgia with this. And then they're really incredible establishing shots in this movie, and it's not all the sweeping vistas that we're used to seeing all the time. All around, just production value is really good in this movie. The costume, and especially the makeup on David, who's David, really good. The sets are believable, the locations are really good, carefully chosen, and just so much attention to detail in this movie. I love the language of this movie. It's predominantly pidgin. I think it's only the children who speak English. Even the radio host, she speaks mostly pidgin, and oh yeah, the doctor, who had a very small role, but predominantly this movie is in pidgin. And Oscar submission, I don't know, we're 6 months in, you know, we're six months in, so I don't think it's too early to start thinking about that. But Oscar submission. All right, let's keep going. I like the editing in this movie very much, so that's also very well done. I like how scenes are cut and just the choices of shots and the way they are compiled together. This movie is just, again, so much attention to detail. It's the small stuff, okay? It's always the detail where the devil is, and in this case, those details are really taken into consideration. Let's talk about the writing. I love the simplicity of the story here. You could call this a slice of life, and I can't remember what movie I referred to. I think it might have been again Kilboro. I'm not sure that I called slice of life, but I want to also call this an everyman story. You know, just these are typical people. It's very relatable. It's not every time stories that want to take on the world. Sometimes, and to be honest, these are the kinds of stories that we have the facility to tell. We might not be able to afford or have the qualifications or whatever to do big sci-fi, whatever, but these small, very personal, very human stories, we excel at them when we choose to do them, and this movie is no exception. Like the choice of topics and themes here, they're very socially relevant. Some of them are the question of what or even who is a father. We have the topic of paternity fraud, and I'm going to say that this movie is very sensitive to the nuances of that conversation, and you could compare this to the way this same topic is handled in Afamefuna, which we talked about not very long ago. And by the way, the two men in both movies, the person who got the wife in the story pregnant and she brings the pregnancy into the marriage, both men are named Paul. Make of that what you will. But anyway, I'm going to say that, you know, comparing this movie with Afamefuna specifically, there's some similarities. For instance, in both cases, both women come out of a relationship and come into, you know, a marriage almost immediately, and they come with baggage and nobody asks questions. So I have the same criticism as I had in Afamefuna, which is really, it never occurred to you with, you know, the slight overlap that maybe some, you know, but whatever. However, as far as the differences, the reaction here feels more truthful, more believable. This character completely breaks down the not all that that, you know, they were doing in Afamefuna that didn't feel very realistic. Another subject that comes up here very slightly, but it does pop up, is sickle cell, but nothing is done with it, so I don't think it even warrants really mentioning. It's just a plot device here. And then we have adoption also, which I think as a country, as a people, we need to talk more about adoption, because I think a lot of people really still don't take adopted children as real children of the parents, and I think that that's such a shame. So let me see, another thing I really like about this movie is the handling of poverty here. Listen guys, you know I like to costume, I like to dress up. I wanted to dress up in poor, you know, but I'm sorry, I don't have poor people costume, I don't do poor people garb. Pearl, okay, fine. The point I'm trying to make here is that poverty is not a costume, and this movie really does handle that very respectfully. This is again a note I made in Kill Borrow. So poverty here is just what it is, a fact of life. It's stark, but it's not self-pitying. It's just there. Some people have money, some people don't. Let's get on with it. It's in the foreground, but it doesn't overshadow the story. It's the world of the story without being what the story is about. This movie has a lot of heart and a lot of humanity. That is a complete sentence. The plot events here are very carefully crafted. I'm going to have things to say about the plot later, but as far as the positives, the plot events are carefully crafted. I like the fact that we have radio here as a character, just a very Nigerian solution for community organizing. Again, very organic. The characters in this movie feel very real. The relationships also feel real. The married relationship, very real. The familial relationship, meaning all five of them and then eventually 6, feels very real. The friendship with Panchak, David and Panchak, and then all three, you know, I don't think we ever see all three in the same scene, but you can tell that there's a thread that connects even the wife with Panchak when they're in a scene and the way he speaks to her. And I've got to say, by the way, that every marriage, every relationship really needs a friend like Panchak. I enjoy the way he holds all parties to account, a huge support, but he also speaks truth, you know, to either when he's speaking with the husband, he's telling him behave better, this or that, he's advocating for the wife, but when he sees the wife, he's like, you fucked up. So I really liked that balance. And then the couple, speaking again of relationships, I'm just gonna say that I really like the chemistry, just the love and the chemistry between this couple. It just feels very real and very tangible. I like the choice to spotlight a taxi driver here, because again, this is an everyman, everyday person that most people who live in a city like Lagos interact with in some way or another. If you're not taking a taxi, you're probably driving in your car and the taxi is pulling off to the side without indicating or cutting in front of you or just something. I think the last time I saw a taxi driver story centered like this was Taxi Driver Okwa, a David O'Hare movie in 2015. The conflict in this movie feels organic. There are a few scenarios that do feel contrived and we'll talk about it, but just generally speaking, the conflicts feel organic. There's some really emotionally impactful scenes in this movie, guys. Let me tell you, the last 30 minutes or so of this movie, I bawled my eyes out. Specifically that phone call when he calls and he's speaking with the daughters. This movie also does dramatic irony really well. There's a specific instance I'd like to highlight. The whole play of having David prove his non-paternity to this missing child is so ironic, only to find out later that it was never even in question. You know, I know I'm kind of laughing, it's not funny, but I thought that was really good dramatic irony there, guys. That brings us to the end of what works in this movie. I mean, that's not to say that this list is exhaustive, but that's how much I'm able to say for one video so that I'm not talking for the next 1 hour. Have you liked this video? Have you flirted with that like button? Give it a little tittle, okay? Subscribe also, and let's go to what does not work. The sound in this movie is just okay, but the score not so much. There are times when, I found the score specifically to be a little bit jarring. But that said, that's the only like technical aspect or detail that gave me any concern. But even that is not enough to take me out of the experience. But it just warrants mention. The pace of this movie is really poor. I don't know. We need to get back to doing movies for as long as they need to be. This movie did not need to be 2 hours and over 15 minutes. I think this movie did not need to be that long. It's not justified. And so the pacing was really poor. Scenes go on, and there's some plot points that they weren't really necessary. The delivery of pidgin in this movie is kind of problematic, and that's something that confounds me. I think the only person who sounds really natural in the way he's delivering his pidgin is David. This movie feels like 2 separate movies. So we have these 2 plots, the missing child plot and then the paternity fraud, and they don't connect very well at all. It's not a case of, there's a main plot and then there's a subplot and then they dovetail together at some point. No, these are just like 2 parallel lines that never quite meet. And it's a simple fix. I think that a better juxtaposition of the parallels in these situations would have drawn these plots together. I did try, but just not in a way that I approve. Let me explain that. Now, so much time is spent in setting up the missing child story, right? Which is one of the plots. The question is, was that to make the point later? Trying to tie that into the paternity fraud story by saying, if you're as much a father to the missing boy that we found and we're adopting outer as you are to these other children, was that where the 2 plots were supposed to meet? And if that was the point, then guys, I've got to tell you that I take complete umbrage to that. That's manipulative. You see, the difference between the 2 situations is that in one case he had everything to do with outer. He brought the baby to the house, he did all the things, and then he and his wife together made the decision. So you cannot use that, because it did come out in dialogue. At some point the wife said to him, how about this other child that we've taken in? Are you also going to say? And I know that was the movie trying to make the point that if you can take an adopted child, then how about these other children? I'm sorry, no, just stop it. Please don't do that. That's manipulative. That's absolutely wrong. In fact, that's fraud. I don't agree with whatever was going on there. And if less time had been spent setting up and dealing, with the missing baby storyline, then there would have been more time, I believe, to truly unpack the emotional impact of the revelation that, the protagonist is not the father of these children. As far as the question of his masculinity, that never really happened. And I thought that was something really, I'm not saying that more should have happened. I'm saying that less should have been devoted to the other plot line, if it should even have existed at all in the first place, so that this way, this movie should have started. I think the climax of the first act should have been this reveal of the paternity, and then the rest of the movie could have been unpacking that. But instead, it ends up being the very end, and then the ending is rushed, and we'll talk about that rushed ending. Yvonne Jegede's character, Ladi, the wife, the mother, what do we know about her? Her character is flat. She's a wife and the mother who sells akara and has some shady tendencies, I suppose. That's pretty much it. There's no complexity to the writing for this character, not of the character and not of her storyline. She didn't even really have a story. Her story is backstory. So I didn't really enjoy that character. The DNA storyline, which was one of the big plots, paternity fraud, it was just handled really shoddily. Starting with the sample collection, that was problematic because, first of all, the way the sample was even collected, but never mind about the logistics of the sample collection, it's more about the purpose for the DNA. Why was he doing the DNA test? It was to prove something, right? So if you're doing something to prove something, there has to be a bit more oversight, because who's to say that you didn't just go and get some random DNA somewhere and submit? Probably the radio station that would organize the DNA and get their own doctor and say, no, we cannot allow you go and bring some random result from somewhere we don't even know who. This is Nigeria, you can fake results, whatever. But you just let him bring a random result from some random swab, and just all of that was not well handled. That's the summary. The paternity fraud here is all but excused. Listen, I appreciate the attempt to write this story nuanced and realistic. However, and I want you to repeat after me, there is no excuse, because I know, again, like I've said, is trying to introduce nuance into it, but saying, you remember the way she kept emphasizing, you remember that time you were drinking all the time and and then it was getting bad and every and if there's anything that I think this movie should maybe highlight, which it doesn't really, but it leaves us space to think for ourselves, there's almost an unspoken she did it for the family. I think she even spoke it here overtly and said, I did it for us, I did it for the family. Couldn't give us a child and then I went out and did it. It's almost like, well, what's left? Ask him to thank you. Why don't you just go ahead and say you should be telling me thank you? So there's never an excuse for this. Again, the movie also touching on the fact that men are usually very touchy about the question of their fertility, and I think that's something that probably needs to change as well on a societal level. And it's almost like even within a couple, when both of them know that it's the man who is sterile, it's almost like there's an unspoken agreement between them to not say that it's him, because a man's masculinity is tied almost so inextricably to his ability to father children. But my point is, there should be as much comfort with talking about infertility on either side, whether it's the man or the woman. But that's not for this movie. That's just making a general point, rather than going to bring another man's child. If your partner is not giving you a child and not submitting to the medical procedure or whatever, then you guys should separate. But it'll never be okay to say the reason I did it was because I did it for us. That will never fly. It'll never be okay. The ending in this movie is rushed. Our protagonist has a huge turning point. He has a change of heart. He makes a decision, and all of this happens off screen. So when they do makeup, that scene kind of falls flat, because it's almost like the decision was made even before he came into that scene. So the scene did not need to be drawn out and all of that, because he came in already decided. What I'd really have liked to see was a closing image of him with the children, because that was the nexus, right? It was about the children. So it would have been nice to see him back with these children, looking at them now with a new set of eyes, which is, these are not my children, but I've made peace with the fact that I'm going to be their father. That whole King Solomon, don't divide my baby moment at the radio station, those two women who came to claim the baby, that was very contrived. It was a contrived way to bring the couple back together. And I don't know if my suggestion for what would have been better, you might think maybe it's too cliche, but we already had a sickle cell crisis that was all but abandoned. I feel like this could have been a more organic way to bring the couple together if that child had a crisis, because she had even asked him, Laddie had asked David, that so you're saying now that they're your children, if one of them is sick now, won't you? No, actually I think it's the friend Panchak who asked him that, and we all know if anything happened to any of those kids. So I think bringing them to a place where he's fighting for the life of that child again, and when that child's life hangs in the balance and he realizes that no way, this is my son, these are my children, I think that would have felt better to me. That would have made more sense. It would have been more realistic to the story we had been told so far about this family. In conclusion, I'm mulling, over the agenda behind the paternity fraud storyline in this movie and the inherent complications. And I'm asking myself, what is this story's position, right? Your guess is as good as mine, but let me just say that I'm conflicted. Every time this story comes out, whenever there's this discussion about paternity in stories, it's always about a man who was infertile. We have that in The Secret Lives of Baba Shegi's Wives. We have that in Stay With Me. And there was also a sickle cell storyline there as well. So that's a way to create nuance. It's kind of shared, like, yeah, the man was sterile, so the woman almost like she had no choice. But when we bring it to real life here, there are a lot of instances where it's just a question of bad women. A woman who just got pregnant for another man and pinned the pregnancy on her spouse or partner. And I think I'm ready for a story like that, because this is too easy. Sterility is a cop-out at this point, because if we really think about it, what is the man supposed to do? Because once he's sterile, you've taken away the options. That's the truth. No matter how you want to turn it, he really doesn't. I made this suggestion in Afamifuna when I said, this child that she brought into this marriage, this child is like, I think 8 or something like that, and they haven't had another child after that. So of course he can do all the ahorom ginaya, because I think maybe at the back of his mind he knows. So again, with this situation, when this man said I can't start all over again, it's a non-starter. When you say I can't start all over, if you leave this marriage and these children, you're basically going to live out the rest of your life. Not now, let's give the man the choice. Let's say this woman just brought children into the home, but he's not sterile, he can have children. What would be his choices? Because here it's almost like he's stripped of choice. By being sterile, it's like I have to make peace with this situation because I'm never going to have any children. But here my shame has already been, and I'm saying shame here please with quotes, because just speaking in the context of the culture, my shame has already been covered for me. So all I need to do is to continue to play along. And I wonder how many of these stories, what happens from here, you know, like of course the movie would end well because it's a movie, that's how it's supposed to end. But in real life, does this family need therapy? Is there some resentment there? I don't know. I think in real life it could be a lot more complicated than the way it wrapped up very nicely in this movie. So again, I ask the question, is the sterility here a cop-out? Because once the man is sterile, acceptance here is more like resignation, okay? Because no choice. All right. So anyway, however you think about it, let me just leave you also thinking about that, but it's up to you. In general, the scripts here could have been tighter. The plot could have been better constructed in merging the two plot lines together if both of them needed to exist simultaneously. But still, this is skilled storytelling that just needed a bit more work. Just good job all around, especially for this director who is a first-time director. I'm feeling really positive, like I've already said, about the industry, about Nollywood. These big name filmmakers better watch out, okay, because these first time directors are really killing it. So I'm feeling good. I recommend this movie unreservedly, you know, right up there with Kilboro so far this year. And I'm just gonna say that this movie is less divisive than Kilboro, because Kilboro had all the domestic violence in there and the handling it could have been better. Let's just put it that way. All right guys, that's it for A Father's Love. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you, and please remember to subscribe if you haven't already, and help me share these videos to your communities. Don't forget, there's going to be linked below a short version to this review, a less detailed, punchy 5-minute version of this review. Guys, did you see my marquee? Do you like it? I thought it was very awkward, but when I was done, I thought it looked pretty good. What do you think? All right, guys, thank you so much. What do I say to you guys? You have the right to an incredible viewing experience, so never settle. Thank you.